since 2020. For 2023, we have filed 35 diplomatic protests. This includes the note verbal hand-delivered during the summoning of the ambassador.
So, Ma'am, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique, si Yusek Lazaro po ang
Yes.
nag-handover mo.
Yusek Lazaro, allow me to give more details about the summoning of the ambassador. Yusek Lazaro conveyed to the Chinese ambassador this morning the strong protest of the Philippine government on the cannon operation by the Chinese Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia vessels against Philippine indigenous boats conducting regular rotation and resupply and humanitarian mission to provide food, fuel, and other basic necessities to the Philippine military personnel stationed on the BRP in Sierra Madre on Ayungin Shoal. The blocking and water cannoning incident against and over an hour. The Undersecretary iterated that the Ayungin or subjected to sovereignty claims. The final and binding 12 July 2016 award in the South China Sea arbitration expressly stated that Ayungin Shoal is within the exclusive economic zone and continental shelf of the Philippines, over which the Philippines has sovereign rights and jurisdictions. The DFA further called China's attention that its actions are likewise contrary to China's flag state obligation under the 1972 International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, which requires states to take measures necessary to ensure safety at sea and prevent ship collisions. The CCG vessels' dangerous maneuvers restricted the Philippine vessels' navigational path, thereby increasing the risk of collision in violation of Rules 2, 7, and 8 of Colburns. The DFA firmly asked China to, 1, direct its vessels to stop their illegal action against Philippine vessels and to stop interfering in legitimate Philippine activities. 2, comply with its obligation under international law, including the 1982 UNCLOS and the 2016 award and the South China Sea arbitration and the 1972 Colburns, and adhere to its commitments under the dock. During the summon, the Philippines, through the FAA, also expressed disappointment that the DFA was unable to reach its counterpart to the maritime communication mechanism for several hours while the incident was occurring, and expressed the hope that the Chinese side will reciprocate with the same sense of urgency. The communication initiated by the Philippines, as has been demonstrated by the Philippines when receiving communications initiated by the Chinese side. At the same time, I'd also like to inform that as we summoned the press, also issued or handed a protest note to the CN Foreign Ministry as of this morning. Next question, please. We'll go this side now. Celerina, please, and then
Good afternoon po. Ma'am, with these recent incidents, or anyone could answer, with the continuous bullying of China against the Philippines and this recent incident, how is the relationship between the Philippines and China now?
Okay. We value our relations with China, and we hope that they too value the relations with the Philippines. But clearly, this incident undermines efforts to strengthen mutual trust and confidence, a crucial element in friendly relations among states between our countries, and it does provide tension in our bilateral relations. As we repeatedly said, the rotation and resupply mission was a routine activity conducted by the PCG and the Philippine Navy within the Philippine EEZ in line with international law, specifically UNCLOS and the Arbitral Award of 2016. UNCLOS and the 2016 Arbitral Award have made clear that the Philippines exercise sovereign rights and jurisdiction on Ayungin Shoal, a low tide elevation within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. China has no right or legal basis to prevent us from exercising such sovereign rights and jurisdiction.
Follow up, could you clarify this statement of the president earlier? Like possible misinterpretation. The president mentioned during the ambush interview this morning, syempre, ang posisyon ng China, sinasabi nila, quote, open quote, kami ang may-ari nito kaya pinagtanggol namin. Tayo naman sinasabing hindi, kami ang may-ari nito, kaya pinagtatanggol namin. Kaya yun ang nagiging gray area ngayon sa pinag-uusapan. Do you agree with the President that there's a gray area on that, considering that it involves the Ayungin Shoal, which is within our EEZ? Anyone could answer.
No, it would be hard for us to offer our views on what the president said. No, I think it would be best if that that question is answered by the office of the president.
Next question, this side, please. Yes, we'll do it this way, yeah? Okay.
Okay na, ayan. Zen Hernandez po, ABS-CBN. Ma'am, are we going to summon the Chinese ambassador so that we can discuss this further? And of course, I would like to relay what I think the Filipino public would be asking at this point. How significant is it for us to file these diplomatic protests despite the fact that, you know, these incidents, you know, keeps happening?
We already summoned, the department has summoned the ambassador this morning. And what I actually recounted was what happened during the summoning of the ambassador. And the ambassador was with us in the department. Our ambassador in Beijing also called on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to actually convey in strong terms our protests against what has happened in Ayungin Shoal. The value of adult verbal is in terms of correcting narratives and in terms of protesting. Some people would say, where does that result? But it's important for us to do so. It's important for the Philippines to continually assert what is rightfully ours, to allow China to continue to do. The policy of this government is very clear. As they said, not 1 inch of our territory should actually be handed over to China.
I haven't. One question lang, ma'am. I just asked one question. The other question is for our clarify this accusation coming from the China Coast Guard that said we are actually bringing construction materials to, and maybe we can clarify as well if we will keep the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal despite all these incidents.
Just to address the question about the diplomatic protests, I think it is very important for the Philippines to continue filing these diplomatic protests, no matter what the reaction of China is. The diplomatic protests are for purposes of putting on record our continuing objection to what the Chinese are doing. The moment we stop issuing these diplomatic protests, it can be construed by China and the international community, particular affairs, will continue to file these diplomatic protests, even if it runs into the hundreds, because precisely by doing so, we are reaffirming our commitment to the Philippine position that it is that the Ayungin Shoal and all other features which we occupy are part of the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. So we exercise sovereign rights and jurisdiction over those features. As to the second question, sorry, can you repeat the question? Okay. When we do supply, when we do resupply missions, and I will ask our colleagues here to also add to this. No? when we do resupply missions, we are exercising our rights, no, under international law. Because as mentioned, we have a permanently stationed Philippine commissioned vessel, Navy vessel in Ayungin Shoal. Okay, so when we do supply, we provide them with what is necessary for the maintenance of the LS-57. So we provide food, we provide everything, provisions, no, irrespective of what China says. It is our right to bring whatever is necessary to maintain the to maintain the station and to ensure that our troops there are properly provisioned. So let me give the floor to the other members of the panel.
Based on the report provided to us, these are supplies that are needed by our people there to make sure that they have food to eat, water to drink, and other supplies needed.
Yes, ma'am. Cecil Morelli of the French news agency. Sir, according to your account, the Chinese have been turning the screw, so to speak. First, they shadow us, and then they hit us with water cannon. They try to ram us, and at one point, they used military-grade laser, as you described it last February. What is the end goal of the Chinese government on Ayungin Shoal and Sabina Shoal, do you think? And is there anything practically that we can do to stop them from achieving that? May I ask Commodore Tariela to answer first?
I'm sorry, sir, but those questions doesn't fall for the Philippine Coast Guard to respond. I think those questions are not for the Philippine Coast Guard to respond, ma'am.
Okay. I think that question is better directed to China. I cannot speak for China.
Yes, I echo the sentiment raised by Colonel Aguilar. I think the end goal of China is for China to actually explain. And for us, the Philippines, is to prepare for any eventuality.
Okay. For the record, we will never abandon Ayungin Shoal. We are committed to Ayungin Shoal. In fact, no, if we're trying to determine although it's better for China to be the one answering this, but if we wish to speculate, no, they're probably looking for weaknesses in the Philippine position, or are trying to gauge our commitment to supply our troops in the shoal. And we are here precisely to reassure the Filipino people that, as directed by our president, we are consistent with the president's directive during the SON, that we will not lose an inch of our territory.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Question from our Zoom participants from Global Daily Mirror. Ambassador, the former President Duterte visited Beijing aspects of the Philippine military. Were there discussions regarding the events past and present in the disputed waters? Do we have any information on what was discussed and why such dangerous acts are still being done by the Chinese Coast Guard?
I'm not privy to the meeting in Beijing, so I have no information to share on that.
I'm Joanna Balyaran from GG Press. Ma'am, we've been firing diplomatic protests against China. No? It's been over 400 note verbales and protests. So what's the next step for the Philippines, ma'am? What are the other forum or platforms are we going to use to, to ask China to cease and desist from what they're doing in the West Philippine Sea?
What is clear, Joanna, is that we will exhaust all fora and exhaust all mechanisms so that we can bring to fore the Philippine position in terms of what's happening in our waters. That's for sure. So, but in terms of diplomatic protest, that's one diplomatic action that's taken. A summoning is another diplomatic action that's taken. Issuing a démarche is really another action that will be taken. But each case will actually determine what course of action will be undertaken by the DFA. And we cannot actually speculate, but we will actually say and stress that the commitment of the DFA is that we will, after an assessment of an incident, we will take appropriate action to actually protect and promote our interests.
Hello, Mara Zapata from the Straits Times. A few days ago, China actually even offered to hold joint patrols in the West Philippine Sea to the military. The offer of China, which something actions there. Are we still going? Is it does this incident in a way affect? Is there a decision already? Will a joint patrol? Does a joint patrol with China even make sense in the West Philippine Sea?
It was just an informal discussion. I don't know if it's even worth to be discussed here. Second, we cannot make a decision on that issue. Third, I think you can ask the people, the Filipino people, on the reaction.
Hi, sirs. I'm Camila Lamia from the New York Times. For the gentleman here, I'd like to ask, when it comes to the ROR emissions, we're seeing more and more of Chinese vessels, Chinese maritime militia vessels. Are we planning to deploy more vessels, if that's even possible, or to increase the frequency of our ROR in Ayungin Shoal specifically?
We have already increased the number of our assets in that area for the conduct of maritime patrols and, of course, to do ROR emissions.
Sir,
As to what we will do exactly, that we cannot tell you for security reasons.
Sir, ilang vessels na po yung dinagdag, and also maybe
Again,
the
that
WPS?
question, ma'am, I'm sorry, is I cannot answer because there are security considerations.
Hi, Sir. Sandra po, GMA7. Sir, there are opinions that the Ayungin situation is already a blockade against the military. So what is your response to that, and what are we going to do? And also, does this already warrant any help or assistance from the US?
Okay, let me answer the first part of the question and let me refer to DFA on the second part of the question. I think the incidents at Ayungin Shoal last Saturday speaks for itself. No, the increased number of Coast Guard vessels, the movement in concert with the Chinese maritime militia, which effectively proves to the whole world that they are instruments of the Chinese Coast Guard or the Chinese Navy or the Chinese government. That these Chinese militia vessels are not disinterested participants or innocent individuals just who happen to be there. No, this was a concerted effort, as mentioned by Commodore Tariela, a concerted effort wherein our ships were effectively corralled. No, so this was like a David versus Goliath situation because there were only 2 Coast Guard vessels and 2 Philippine supply boats against 6 Chinese Coast Guard vessels and 2 Chinese militia vessels and more People's Liberation Army naval vessels at near proximity to the area. So technically, no, this looks like a blockade of the Ayungin Shoal, okay? Because the facts on the ground, as can be seen by everyone through the videos and the photos that we have shown today, clearly showed the increased deployment of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels. I think the most number, tama ba, Commodore? The most number in recent memory. Okay. As to the second question, may I turn over to the DFA?
Does this warrant already the any help or assistance from the US under the US RPUS Mutual Defense Treaty?
Well, the United States has actually publicly affirmed in its statement and in various statements and at the highest level that it has ironclad commitment to the defense of the Philippines pursuant to the Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty of 1951. And here we deal with the concept of what constitutes an armed attack in the Pacific. But there is no clear definition as to what defines public vessels in the MDT, and there are ongoing negotiations on it. In terms of your specific question, whether it warrants the invoking of the mutual defense, I think it's a bit early.
Okay. Oops, sorry. Hi. Okay na. Hi, Ambassador Daza Sofia Tomer Cruz from CNA. Just to follow up Ms. Sandra's question as well. You defines a public vessel under the MDT with the great detail that that NTF has also shared regarding the recent incident. Are we moving towards perhaps a definition of what a public vessel would be and what might that look like, considering it was also mentioned that these were commissioned by the Philippine Navy, they were manned by officers of the Philippine Navy. So yeah, what is this incident? What impact does it have on the MDT, and kind of clarifying what constitutes the threshold for assistance?
I have no information to share on that at this moment. Yeah.
Okay. Just to follow up as well on perhaps using other fora, how does the Philippines view the viability of a code of conduct with ASEAN and China, considering the repeated nature of the incidents and also the escalating nature, what appears to be the escalating nature of the incidents? Does this still seem useful, considering not negotiating as a form of protest, perhaps?
Thank you for that. The Philippines remains committed to the pursuit of an effective and a substantive code of conduct. China's continuing coercive actions, a reflection of a dire need for us to actually set up rules that would guide our actions at sea and prevent tensions from escalating in the region.
Good afternoon, sirs and ma'am. Martin Sadongdong from Manila Bulletin. Sir, this question is addressed to Colonel Aguilar and Commodore Tariela. Sirs, what's the status of our personnel? How is their morale, especially those on board the BRP Sierra Madre and those who experienced the incident?
We are always prepared for all eventualities, and therefore the morale remains high.
For the Philippine Coast Guard crew of the BRP Malapasco and BRP Cabra, their morale remains high. You still have the commitment of the Philippine Coast Guard that despite of the danger, despite of the dangerous maneuver that the China Coast Guard would always do every time that there's a resupply mission in Ayungin, the Philippine Coast Guard will still carry out the mission and support the armed forces of the Philippines.
We have time for at least two more questions. So if we can, yes, this side, and then yes, can we give the floor to those who have not yet asked questions, if that's all right? So the gentleman in the red, please.
Question, Rainier from the Philippine Star, for Commodore Tariela. Curious lang, sir. Does the PCG have a water cannon capability? So maybe we can also fire back. And are you allowed to, kasi they're also using it naman yata di ba? On us. Can we also use it on them?
Well, for your information, sir, the MRV vessels that came from Japan are also equipped with water cannon. But unlike the Chinese Coast Guard, we're not going to use that to drive away the China Coast Guard. We intend to use that in firefighting whenever there is a maritime accident at sea. That's the usage of our water cannon, sir.
Hi po, spokes and our gentleman here. I'm John Garner from Tribune. A while ago, DJ Malaya gave us the soundbite that we've been waiting for. Sabi niya, we will never, or the Philippines will never abandon Ayungin Shoal. Given the current state of BRP Sierra Madre, we would like to know how will the Philippines maintain its position in the Ayungin Shoal, given the current state of the commissioned vessel there.
Again, the BRP Sierra Madre is a Philippine Navy commissioned vessel. It's an active Philippine Navy commissioned vessel. Therefore, we will continue to supply it. We will do what is necessary to provide supplies and provision for our troops there. So,
during the adoption of the Senate resolution, which urges the DFA to elevate the Chinese Equilateral or mentioned that isang bagyo na lang daw hindi na natin alam kung ano mangyayari doon sa BRP Sierra Madre. Again, paano po natin ma-maintain yung position natin doon? Thank you.
We will do what is necessary to make sure that it will continue to stand there.
One last question. This side. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Hi, ma'am. BBC po. The China Coast Guard just released a statement po. One of the lines says, China urges the Philippines to tow away the grounded warship from Ren-Ai Reef and restore it to its original state. Do we have like a statement on this po? To tow away daw po.
They want us to operation.
Who is China Coast Guard to tell us what to do?
So, are we okay with one more question? Are we okay with one more question? Yes, one more question then.
How come? How did you? Why did you put the Sierra Madre on that reef, on that shoal, and why did you put it there?
I think I need to do a research on that, sir. I will as soon as I have the information. Thank you.
About closing, we will give the floor now to ADG Malaya for his closing remarks.
on behalf of Secretary Eduardo Emanio, the Chair of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, first I'd like to thank our colleagues, Yusek Dasa, of course, and our friends from the Department of Foreign Affairs for hosting this meeting, this press conference here, my colleagues from the Coast Guard and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Department of National Defense, and of course, the Presidential Communications Operations Office for their support to the NTF-WPS. I'd also like to thank our colleagues from the media for your support and coverage of this incident. No, may request lang kami sa NTF-WPS kasi kung minsan naririnig namin sa mga balita na parang in question pa rin yung ating in question pa rin yung ating pagmamay-ari sa mga features na clearly was already awarded to us by the 2016 arbitral ruling and the provisions of the UNCLOS. Kasi meron pang illegal. Wag na natin gamitin sana to our friends from the media. The legal position of the Philippines is very clear and is supported by many countries. No? So we ask the support of the narrative and not fall into the narrative of the Chinese government and so for us to end this press conference by again commending the valiant men and women of our armed forces, in particular the Armed Forces Western Command, Naval Forces West, Philippine Navy, and of course the Philippine Coast Guard, for their daring, bravery, and commitment to duty, despite all odds and despite increased tensions in the West Philippine Sea. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you.